Welcome, I'm your host, Malcolm Gallagher. From our BizVision studios in the UK, you're watching the BVTV network. Now, the old saying is, nothing happens until something is sold. And it's as true today as it's ever been. Even Mother Nature's got to be sold today. However, increasingly people and businesses shy away from sales and selling, thinking that those customers are just going to fly in through their windows because of a few tweets. Today's astute sales leader and sales director knows that selling has changed through technology, pandemic, and other things, and will never be the same. Virtual selling and virtual buying will prevail. But that astute leader also knows that in selling, experience counts, as it's invariably a people thing. Buyers buy the person before the company and the product. So today we're going to meet someone exuding not only sales experience, but also a thinker of today. He's got a new book out called Leadership, Levity and the Power of Baked Alaska. So let's say hello to Steve Smith. Welcome, Steve.
Hello, Malcolm. Good morning. Pleasure to see you.
Listen, Steve, we're going to talk about Baked Alaska first, but what are you doing sitting on top of a hill?
Yes. Well, interesting picture. It's near where I live. It's the highest point on Merseyside. It's called Billinge Hill. And you're looking down across my hometown of St Helens and over towards Widnes and Runcorn and North Wales beyond that. In fact, just above my shoulder, there's looks a little white triangle. That is actually the Runcorn Widnes Jubilee Bridge, which has been used in quite a few advertising down the years. It was in the Cathedral City advert about 10 years ago, and it was used as a backdrop for advertising dinky cars in the 60s.
Wow.
So,
yeah,
famous bridge, but there's now a second crossing that was built a few years ago as well. So you can't quite see that on this picture, but the Jubilee Bridge is there.
Yeah. So just for those people around the world, particularly in America, who are saying, where's he talking about? Tell us exactly where that is. It's near Liverpool, isn't it?
It is. It's northwest England. The bridge that I was just talking about crosses the River Mersey. And if you like, it's the northwest's equivalent of the Golden Gate or the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Maybe not quite as glamorous, but it's our version.
Yeah, right. Okay, so you don't need the ferry across the Mersey, you just take the bridge. Okay.
Well,
right.
Yeah, the ferry still runs, but it's a bit more of a tourist thing these days rather than an essential service.
Yeah, it's a lovely but dynamic area, fascinating dynamic area on there. Now, Steve, thanks for kindly guesting on BBTV. Viewers, listeners, I'll be chatting to Steve in 3 parts. Part 1 is, why do so few UK leaders understand the value of salespeople and the contribution those people make to business success? In part 2, I want to talk to Steve about sales and leadership today. To me, they are intertwined. The leader should be a salesperson too. And in part 3, I want to talk to Steve about leader attributes today, especially that really important 5-letter word, trust. But first, Steve, who is Stephen Smith? Your journey so far, and what the heck is Baked Alaska about? It's not another cookbook, is it? What do you want it to do for people?
No, it's not another cookbook. It's not another cookbook. And that's why it's essentially called Leadership, Levity and the Power of Baked Alaska, because if I'd have called it just Baked Alaska, it would have come up on SEO as a cookbook. So I had to change that a little bit. But we'll come back to that in a moment. I mean, who am I? I'm from the northwest of England. I went to university in Sheffield in the 80s, did business studies, and after that I joined Procter & Gamble, which was fantastic. Yeah, one of the great blue chip FMCG companies, of course, and had a 9-year career there selling, very well-known, famous brands into the UK market, into the grocers and the wholesalers. Brilliant company, great training, thoroughly enjoyed it. Things changed in my life and I moved on. Moved on to another US multinational and another highly well-known company with very famous brands, which was Kellogg's. And I spent 5 years at Kellogg's in a variety of different sales and consumer marketing and customer marketing roles. And then for 15 years, I then became sales director of AG Bar PLC, who are a soft drinks manufacturer. And the most famous brand is Iron Brew, which is Yeah, the number one brand in Scotland.
Is it made from girders, by the way? Go on, I know the advert.
Not quite, but there is iron in it. There is actually iron in it. So it's a fair claim. But one of the interesting claims to fame of Iron Brew is that we were always told that there's only two markets in the world where Coca-Cola isn't the undisputed number one soft drink, and it's Peru and Scotland. So yeah, a little claim to fame for Iron Brew there. A great brand, really, really loyal consumers, and it was fun to work with. Yeah,
brilliant. Yeah. So that arrives us now towards Business Doctors and, of course, the book. What's the book about?
Well, the book is basically a distillation of my 30 years of learning and experience in those various sales roles. I'm now working in a different type of role in the local business community as a business doctor. But, my background was all sales and marketing. And, I've been in charge and led large teams, worked with big brands, worked with some incredible retailers and wholesalers. And I just felt there was quite a lot of stories I could share. There was experiences that I could pass on, some good experiences for people to build on, some less good experiences that they could maybe learn from and avoid some of my mistakes and the mistakes of others. So it was kind of a 30-year thing. Going back to the start of my P&G career, I thought there's some things that I'm enjoying here. There's some learning that could be passed on. And when lockdown came and obviously the world was turned on its head, I just thought, well, now or never. If I don't write this up now, I'll probably never get round to it. So I bashed away on the keyboard for a few months.
Yeah, I've got to say, I've had that advanced look at it, and I like what I like about it is that it's not all about forgetting the past. You actually do remember the lessons you've learned in the past. But I also like that at the end of each chapter, you make us ponder. I think it's points to ponder. That's it, isn't it?
It is indeed, yeah. And that was a deliberate word because, it's not about someone who believes they know all the answers. It's about sharing experiences and helping other people to learn.
Yeah.
So there's lots of management theory and leadership theory from the Simon Sineks of the world back to the Maslows of the world. Right. There's lots of that in it to point people to be able to go off and look at these areas in more detail. I'm not the expert on it all. I'm just sharing my experiences and how I saw some of the theories and some of the ideas in action. But everyone's an individual, and we've all got our own sort of opportunity, I suppose, to be a leader. And it's about providing a bit of a map and some guidance, not an actual blueprint as to this is how you do it, because it varies by person, it varies by situation. So with the glories of Google, you can find out anything these days about any subject with just a few clicks. So, there's a few pointers in it to go and look at. But at the end of the day, leadership speaks for itself. Most people, know what leadership's about. Levity, the idea there is that business should be fun. It shouldn't always be sort of very sort of clinical and dry and people. I've always had fun doing business, and I'd like to encourage that. So I've shared quite a lot of light-hearted stories from it. Yeah. And then the Baked Alaska bit. Well, you've got to read the book to find out what that's all about.
Right.
It's a story in one of the chapters.
Yeah. I tell you what I'm going to be studying later on. I hadn't had time to read it, but I'm going to study that bit in your book about the dark triad. But Steve, let's get going. Let's get going on part one. Why do leaders not understand the value of salespeople and the contribution they make to business success? Now, in the UK, very few companies have salespeople on their main board. Yet the reverse is true in the United States, where sales and marketing comes first. After all, if you don't sell something, you've got no beans to count, have you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one thing I've always said to sales teams. Obviously, sales are sales, and like most parts of an organization, they think they're the most important people. But the thing that I would always say to my sales teams is, well, usually we're the only department that actually brings money in. Everything else, spends money as a cost, whereas sales actually bring money into the business. So it's really important in that respect. But I think touching on the question, I think one of the things is that a lot of salespeople's best work is done externally.
Mm.
You're dealing with customers, you're selling to customers, negotiating with customers, working with customers. So that's outside of the organization and isn't always seen by everyone else. Whereas, if you work in an internal function like finance or operations or something, everybody else kind of has a bit more access to what you're doing and can see it. So a lot of what sales do is, hidden a little bit. So I think that's one factor. I think another factor is that, with sales, you don't need any formal qualifications. So, to be in finance, to be an accountant, CIMA or certified registered, whatever accreditation you have, similarly, there's things in supply chain and HR where you can go out and get these qualifications. Similarly with marketing, Chartered Institute marketing things, but isn't really anything like that for sales. There's no sort of formal qualification or accreditation that you get. So, again, I think some people look at sales as being, not quite as important because you don't need those qualifications. And in some people's minds, it's still all about the gift of the gab, the old-fashioned double glazing salesman and foot in the door and things, which, there might be a few people who operate like that now, but that's a world apart from the sales organization in FMCG or in IT or something. That just doesn't happen like that. So the whole gift of the gab, and it's all about, how well you get on with people and talking to people, just isn't, that's the past. It's not the present. If you're dealing with an account like Tesco, one of the biggest retailers in the world, an hour meeting with the customer, you'll have probably spent about 50 hours on analysis and prep and research to get to that meeting. And then you'll probably spend another 10 hours, for example, on follow-up. The actual time with the customer is only an hour, so, sales is just as process driven and is just as structured as other departments. It's just probably not recognized in the same way.
Yeah, I like that really important point you just talked about, the fact that it's external, because somebody internal thinks, oh, that salesman's off swanning around in his company car there, wandering in and picking up the order. That's all he's got to do. Heck, if you're making a cold call, I don't know about you, but I even to this day, when I'm going to a new customer, I still get that sort of butterflies in my tummy. It's excitement in one way, but also a little bit of trepidation. Another, what's the buyer going to be like? What's the person going to be like? And you really have to psych yourself up, don't you?
Oh, you do, absolutely. Because, I think, to be honest, Malcolm, over 30 years, sales to me comes down to two things, and I call it R&R. And we're not talking rest and recuperation, although people do think salespeople spend too much time on the golf course or on exotic conferences. But the R&R I'm talking about is relevance and relationship. Mm-hmm. Now, the relevance is your proposition, is your brand, is what you're taking to the customer. For someone like, Procter & Gamble and Kellogg's that I've worked for in the past, you're highly relevant because they're massive, well-known brands. So the customer is going to listen to you because you've got that relevance. The other axis, if you like, is the relationship side of things. And certainly when you're meeting a buyer for the first time, or maybe an element of cold calling, you haven't got that relationship. You can't rely on that relationship. The relationship still has to build. So you might get through the door because you're selling furry liquid, but you've still got to build up that relationship as well. And I think that's where the trepidation comes from. Because at the end of the day, we are people, things have become a lot more automated. You can sell online. But ultimately, that buyer-seller relationship, certainly in a business-to-business context, is still really important. The relationship counts.
Yeah, and that, I know, and that will not go away without a doubt. And the old saying that the buyer buys you first before they buy your company or your product will remain forever. Steve, before we get to part two, let me remind the viewers and listeners of Steve's website. Now, obviously, viewers, you can see the URL, but for listeners, let me read it out for you. It is businessdoctors.co.uk, businessdoctors.co.uk. That doesn't mean you put bandages over ailing businesses, does it, Steve?
Well, we can, if that's what's required, but, the Business Doctors idea was two guys founded it about 15 years ago and then franchised the model. And the idea was they didn't want to describe themselves as coaches, and they didn't want to describe themselves as consultants, because they're both, valuable parts of the business environment, but carry a little bit of baggage sometimes, perhaps. So they came on the idea of business doctors, because doctors is someone that, you trust. People tend to trust the doctor. And, kind of a bit more like a general practitioner. You go to the doctor, with your various ailments and things. That doctor will help as much as they can. And then if they can't help with something very specific, they refer you to a consultant. And that's what we'll do as well. We'll provide a lot of general help in terms of planning, strategy, support. But then occasionally there'll be, some specialized area, and we've got a network of people we work with and affiliates that we can call in to help with something specific. The whole idea, as you say, is, you go to the doctor when there's something wrong, but equally, and more so these days, people go to the doctor when they've not got anything wrong. They go for health checks. They go for checkups just to make sure, preventative. So we're not just here to fix broken businesses, far from it. We're very much here to help thriving businesses get even better and ultimately achieve their vision.
Excellent. Yes. Look, just to remind people again of the title of the book, Leadership, Levity, and the Power of Baked Alaska. It's published by who, Steve?
It's on Kindle on Amazon at the moment. Published through myself and the editor's chair, who are a wonderful company that have released a number of books in this area. In the business area, but also other titles. It's available, as I say, on Kindle on Amazon now. The actual code for that is behind me. It's on Amazon.com for the US as well. And the printed versions will be available from next week.
Excellent. Okay, moving to part 2. Let's talk sales and leadership today. To me, they're intertwined. The leader should be a salesperson too. Every business needs to be agile and entrepreneurial in this new world, this new altered world. Leaders need to be visible and virtual, don't they? Just as much as salespeople. So what's your thoughts on how businesses should be moving forward with recovery and growth and having the ability to compete to secure orders in this altered world?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, as you say, the world has changed, obviously. We use the phrase omni-channel now because there's so many different ways that you can get to consumers, stores, websites, social media, big brands. A lot of businesses are active in a variety of different channels. The days of just selling to one shop, are pretty much gone. And that's a modern phenomenon because of the ease with which we can communicate and share information. So yes, I mean, a lot of things in that respect have changed from a sales perspective. But to me, the essence of selling is still the same. It's still about matching your product or your service with customers' needs. And hopefully making money out of it. So that vision of the end point of the sales process, completing the sale, getting the money in the bank, is all still about your product, your service, meeting consumers' needs.
So isn't there a little extra that, Steve, now, though, that actually helping the buyer see their need? Because sometimes, particularly as times have changed, they may not see that they have the need for your product because they haven't realized the benefits or the change in direction. So is the today's salesman more of an educator than ever before?
I think in a lot of categories, yes. I mean, we all know what washing up liquid does, but there's so many new products and markets nowadays that do need a lot of education.
Yes.
There's a great video that I've watched a number of times on YouTube called Did You Know? It used to be called Shift Happens, and then they kind of changed it.
Oh, yes, I remember. Yeah.
And, every time I watch that, it's fascinating because it shares, the number of searches on Google, the amount of information, and a lot of things it says is that, students starting a 4-year course, half of what they learn is out of date by the time they finish. And at the moment, we're preparing people for jobs that we don't even know what those jobs are going to be. They don't exist yet, but we're having to prepare people because technology and information changes so quickly. I just think that's absolutely fascinating. But I think in terms of, the education bit, to me, sales isn't that different from the leadership model that I was brought up with at Procter & Gamble, called the 3 E's, which is envision, enable, and energize. And the sales process isn't that different. from that. You think about Envision, where you're trying to get to. Well, obviously, you're wanting to get your product listed by a customer, bought by a consumer, and sell as much as you can. That's ultimately your vision. But you need to enable the buyer. You need to enable the consumer through that process. And that's where the education comes in, and the supporting tools and the education. Yeah. And then finally is the energized bit. You've got to make sure that they want to do it, that they're enthusiastic for it. And I think, touching back on part one, you said about the difference between sales in the UK and the US. I think one of the difference for me is that the US has just got that bit more culturally of such an adventurous spirit. Maybe it's the way that the nation grew through history, the pioneering spirit, the energy to do that. Whereas the UK obviously has evolved over, the culture evolved over a much longer period. And we are at times a little bit more conservative and traditional. Whereas in the States, you get that much more perhaps energy and enthusiasm at times. And, energy is important for business. Of course it is. And those who can energize others and influence others to achieve the vision are going to be more successful.
Yeah, and I love that word energizing, because I think that's certainly what is needed in lots of UK companies to do today. Steve, now for part 3, I want to ask you about leadership attributes today, and especially that word trust. Now, I personally dislike the term soft skills, as it implies that they are emotional add-ons, like trust and agility. They're not emotional add-ons. They're, to me, essential. Particularly, I know that you are a great admirer of emotional intelligence. What do you see as essential personal attributes for business success today?
Well, I think, first of all, I don't even use the phrase soft skills. I don't even have it in my sort of vocabulary, to be honest. And I write about this a lot in the book, as you say. I mean, 3 words for me are really, really important if you're going to have a successful business these days. And they all begin with T. And they are trust, transparency, and teamwork. And if you haven't got those 3, your business is probably going to struggle. And, the old hierarchical, paternalistic, knowledge is power type of structure, it still exists and it's still out there, but it's old hat. It really is old hat. And the people who, go down that, knowledge is power and hold information to themselves and don't trust other people, it's archaic and they need to move on. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And Patrick Lencioni does some great work on his dysfunctions of a team, and the basic is trust. You need trust in an organization, because without trust, you're not going to be able to resolve conflict. Yeah. And you need conflict in an organization. You don't need people hitting each other and bashing each other over the head, but you do need what I call a level of healthy tension, because if you don't get that, then you don't get breakthrough and innovation. So healthy tension is really important, but you need trust to be able to get through that healthy tension. So trust for me is absolutely crucial. And I've always personally tried to do business and work with people in a very open and trusting way, and try to be consistent, because consistency, I think, implies integrity. You don't have to always be consistent in style, but you need to be consistent in your principles and in the way you treat people. Yeah. And the transparency, these days you can't sit on information and hide information, because it travels too fast. Things get out on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn really, really quickly. And the same within an organization. So, you need a level of transparency. You need to share things. And again, in a lot of organizations I've experienced, I call it the corporate Illuminati, where you get a little group, maybe not necessarily the board, not necessarily at the very top, but you'll often get a little group of very close confidants who like to be in charge and like to control things. And transparency isn't in their interest, because they want to keep the data, the knowledge, and the influence to themselves. And again, I just don't do business that way. I think it's archaic. Yeah. And if you haven't got that trust and you haven't got that transparency, you're never going to have real teamwork. And you can go online and find hundreds of thousands of quotes about the importance of teamwork, and a lot of people will trot out how important teamwork is, but then not actually do it and not actually show it, because again, they're still mired with a lack of trust and transparency. So you get your trust in your organization, you've got transparency in your organization, important building blocks for the teamwork that follows. And as we all know, you can achieve more as a team than you usually can as an individual. So for me, very, very simple, the 3 T's.
I really like that as well, because really they're your own personal mantra or faith, aren't they? Today, there's far too many people who are sort of allow themselves to be sculpted in the corporate look or the corporate speak and everything, and they lose their own faith. They lose their own they're a clone, in other words. They lose their own cultural ability. And I suggest to you that what you're saying about the 3 T's is so important from a personal strength point of view, the one thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not trying to make myself out to be a saint or anything like that, even though I am from St. Helens.
Yeah.
But, that was just the way I did business, you know, and I came into an environment like Procter & Gamble, which perhaps was a wonderful company, but as we chatted off camera before, a little bit stuffy and formal in some respects. And I just couldn't really understand why people didn't share information with other people. Perhaps I was just a bit naive, but, I would just share information and keep people in the loop because I didn't see any other way of doing it. That's just how it was. And I don't think that always helped me earlier in my career, to be honest. But, 30 years on, I feel as though I've always conducted myself, with levels of integrity and principle. And, I'm not going to start deviating from that now. But that conformity is an interesting one. It's a story I should have put in the book, actually, and I don't think I did. But
have we got a breaking news here?
Well, no, it's just a story. We used to, when we were at P&G, some of the customers, the grocery trade, the Asdas, the Tesco's, they used to call us proctoids. Right. They used to say we were all the same. We were all basically grey suits, dour, lacking in a bit of personality, and they used to call us proctoids. And the interesting thing was that when proctoids went on a sales meeting and it was casual dress, virtually everybody used to come and wear exactly the same clothes in terms of a blazer, white shirt. So, we called it golf club casuals, and it was just like, you were either in your suit, a proctoid, or you were golf club casuals, completely conforming. Hardly anybody came in any kind of different clothes. So I'd forgotten to put that one in the book. But,
I think IBM had that one, and it called us the Big Blue, and everybody wore a blue suit and black shoes, and they did that on holiday as well, just about as well. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you, Steve, here about it, and I've enjoyed dipping into your book. And as I say, I'm going to study the Dark Triad bit later on there. Yes, we're in a new and altered world, and yes, much has changed, and today's business leader has to be agile, adaptable, competitive, but also, I believe, conscious. But there's more to it than that, such as trust, compassion, almost all fashioned values brought up to date, as trust you've learned from my interview with Baked Alaska author Stephen Smith. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks very much, Malcolm. Absolute pleasure.